If you have watched Hey Arnold, you know that character Eugene? I feel like him right about now. Hey everybody, it is Chastity Elise. I am back for another video. And right now my Mac is acting funny. I tried to use some software on it last week and it just had a meltdown. Like, it started making this very loud, like, squealing noise. And I honestly think the battery is just destroyed. It's just, yeah. So I just think at this point it's probably the battery that needs to be replaced and not just the cord, because it seemed like it was charging, but it's not. So I'm not sure, because I let it sit on the charger for a whole day and nothing is still saying that it's dead. So anyway, I'm just gonna get into this video. So basically this is gonna be a story time. So my key fob for my car has been, the battery's been low for at least the past week or like the past 2 weeks. And so basically, if my keys, the way that my car is set up is that if the keys are in the car has the technology to sense that the keys are in there and it shouldn't lock. However, we're gonna get into that. It should not lock if the keys are inside of the car. Of course, that is not what happened this day. I was leaving here. I was going to get mail like I normally do. I normally go to our mailboxes. I get out and I don't normally have a problem. So I got out and I got my mail, and then I went to get back in the car and I put the handle and it didn't open. And so I looked and I'm like, okay, so it's locked. And I'm like, how is this possible if my keys are inside? And here's the bad part. So I have, you know, I have a regular key and then I have a spare key, which most people do have spare keys for their car. So I had not only the original key, but I also had the spare key inside of the car, because I was like, well, since the battery's low on one of them, I know the battery isn't low on the other one because I haven't been using it. So I'm like, well, I'll just get the other key and I'll put that in the car, and maybe it won't give me the low battery warning or message that I've been getting. So anyway, both of the keys are in the car. I'm wearing short sleeves. There's a story about that. So before I left here, something said, get a jacket. It's kind of cold outside. I'm like, okay, but I'm just going to the mailbox. I'm just gonna get out like I normally do, grab the mail real quick, get back in the car, and I'm good. Like, I'm not gonna be outside in the cold. But something told me to get a jacket and I didn't listen. So I got in the car and that's what happened. So anyway, I end up at the mailboxes. The car is locked. The keys are inside for the car. The keys to my house are inside the car. My cell phone is inside the car. My laptops are inside the car. How am I gonna contact anybody? So I've got the top lock, which can be activated and deactivated with a keypad. And then I've got the bottom lock that you have to actually use a key for. Well, anyway, both of them are locked. So even if I put the correct number into the keypad and it unlocked one of them, the other one's still locked because I don't have a key for it, because the key is inside the car. And the back door, like the back door that I have, it's locked. So literally there's no way to get in my house. But I was like, I don't know what to do. So I left my car and I walked back here to my house, and I was like, well, maybe I can just enter the code, maybe something, I don't know. Anyway, I knew it wasn't gonna work, but you know, it's just kind of like one of those things where it's just like disbelief. So I'm like, okay, well, let me go back to my car. And mind you, it's like the high at this point is 46 degrees and the low is 43 degrees. Fortunately, like, this was around 4:30. So I'm like, well, let me go back to the car. I'm like, I honestly cannot believe that the keys are locked inside, because this has never happened. And it was kind of implied that something like that shouldn't happen just based on the mechanics and the technology, whatever, but technology obviously is not perfect. So I was like, well, let me go back to the mailboxes and let me try again. You know, maybe it's me. Maybe the door is not locked and maybe it's just me. Y'all, look. Oh no, I'm not gonna pull on it. Look at this mess. My car is locked. I'm gonna lock myself out the car. Locked. And I can't get in. All I did was stop to get some mail. So I went back and I pulled on the door, nothing happened. It's very much locked. And so I'm like, okay, well, it's roughly like 4:30, you know, eventually it's gonna be like 5 o'clock-ish, whatever. Like it's about time for people to get off. So I'm like, well, let me just hang out for a little bit. I'm like, chances are, you know, a lot of people will stop by. A lot of people's instincts might be to stop by the mailbox on the way home. So I'm like, okay, well, let me just hang out here by the mailbox. Let me wait and see if somebody comes. I'm sitting out here with short sleeves on. It's cold and like my ears are freezing and everything else. And like the neighborhood is relatively quiet. Everybody out here basically keeps to themselves. So it's like as I'm walking like back and forth, or as I'm walking from the mailbox to here and then from here back to the mailboxes, like I see like one person walking and he's like on the opposite side of the road and he was gone, like he was out of there. So I didn't get a chance to like wave him down or anything like that. So other than him, there was literally nobody outside. So I'm like, well, my best chances are at the mailboxes. So I just stand there, wait at the mailboxes. And then fortunately, a lady pulls up in her SUV and she gets out the car and she's kind of like, you know how when you see strangers, you're like, well, I don't really know why this person is here. I don't really understand, or I don't know why this person's hanging out here, and then they've got on short sleeves. It's cold outside, so I'm not really sure what's going on. So she kind of had this thing of like laser focus of just going straight to the mailbox and going back to her car. So I was like, I kind of waved at her when she pulled in, and I'm like, hey, I'm in the neighborhood. I live in the neighborhood, but my keys, my phone, like everything is locked in the car. I'm like, I can't get in touch with anybody. Do you mind if I use your phone to make a phone call? So I called my parents on the house phone first, and I called my mom's cell. And you know, there's a lot of scam calls that we get. I'm sure a lot of you all get them too, like just during the day. And it's like 1-800 numbers or numbers that you just don't recognize. And we don't answer it, and I'm sure a lot of other people don't either, because it's like, I don't recognize the number. If it's important, they can leave a message. So anyway, so I called my parents and that kind of thing. And you know, with coronavirus going on, I honestly felt like I was stuck. I'm like, I don't know what I'm gonna do, because like, who is really gonna want to interact with a stranger? I don't have a mask on, because obviously I didn't intend to be in that kind of situation. So I didn't have a mask on. When she got out of the car, she didn't have a mask on. She wasn't intending to interact with anyone either. So anyway, she ended up being really nice, and she's like, you know, I've actually had this happen to me before. I was like on the way to work, and she ended up having her keys and everything just locked in the car. She said she had to call the cops to come and unlock the car for her. So she was definitely very understanding about the situation. She was extremely nice. And so she ended up actually offering me a ride, and she was like, well, you know, she's like, so you don't have to stand out here, you know, like, do you want, like, would you want to ride? And I was like, well, yeah. I was like, I'm going to my parents' house, but they're not in the neighborhood. She thought they were in the neighborhood, but I was like, no. So my parents are like up the street from here. She was like, okay, well, that's fine. She's like, I'll give you a ride there. And so I'm sitting up here like calling my parents. They're not answering. So I'm like, well, my best bet at this point, I called the house once. I called my mom's number. And then I was like, well, I'll call the house back, and then I'll just leave a message, because I'm like, they're probably not answering because they don't recognize the number. And she's like, yeah, she's like, I've got an out-of-state number, so of course they wouldn't recognize it. But anyway, I left a message and I basically kind of explained, and I'm like, yeah, I'm like, hey mom, I'm on the way to you all's house. My keys are stuck in the car. I don't have access to my phone or anything else. So I'm getting a ride from a neighbor. So anyway, we're both riding in the car. Neither one of us have on masks. We're both like, we're having conversations, because obviously if you're in a car with somebody and it's like, say, a 30-minute ride or so, it's kind of weird and it's kind of awkward not to have conversations, or at least not to talk to each other. So, you know, we're in the car, we're talking and that kind of thing, whatever. And so eventually we end up at my parents' house, that kind of thing. And so obviously at this point, with my parents being older, I'm having to go into quarantine.
Mom and I are in the car waiting on AAA to come. Now I'm gonna be stuck in quarantine for the next several weeks. I didn't go anywhere. I just got a ride from a neighbor. So the good things keep, you didn't have your pocketbook. What? You had a mask in your pocketbook, but you didn't have your pocketbook, so it wouldn't matter. Yeah, I didn't have a mask, and the neighbor didn't have a mask, but she wasn't expecting to take anybody up at the mailbox. So, and I wasn't expecting to get a ride at the mailbox. That was not the intended trip. I didn't even have a jacket on. And it's cold here. Oh well. That's it.
So that is what I'm doing, and I'm like, seriously, like, anyway, so my neighbor, she didn't have any symptoms of coronavirus. As far as I know, she didn't show any symptoms. And for the most part, she kind of seemed, because it's like, you don't want to be rude. You don't want to be rude and be like, well, there's a virus going around. This person's offering you a ride too. And so we just kind of, like, we talked about it. I brought it up, whatever. And, you know, from what she mentioned, from what she said to me, she seemed like she was pretty cautious about the virus, because like she said that when she goes to work, she makes sure that she wears a mask, and that she and her family takes precautions outside of their home. So for the most part, I feel like I'll be fine, everything will be fine. But just out of precautionary measures, I'm basically quarantining here at my house. So just because of my parents being older, and then my dad with his health issues going on, so we figured that the best thing for me to do is to be here. And so here I am. And I'm like, at least if I was gonna be quarantined, I would have at least wanted it to be like, you know, you got all these people, they're going on these flights and these elaborate trips and all these big things that they're still doing despite the virus. And I'm like, I didn't travel anywhere. I didn't get to do anything fun. So I'm just like, so now I'm stuck here and I gotta quarantine for, they said a couple of days, just because like it didn't seem like either of us had any symptoms of the virus when we interacted. So basically it was suggested that I do just a couple of days here, and then after I do a couple of days here, then maybe I can go back home. But initially I was like, okay, so great, I'm gonna have to be here for 14 days, which I'm like, well, that's fine. Maybe I can work on some music, maybe I can get some other stuff done. Anyway, we can wrap this story up right quick. But so I ended up at my parents' house, and so we had to come back to get the car, obviously. So came back and we called AAA. If you all don't have AAA, I strongly suggest getting it. because it's really good service. So they come out, like if you need road assistance, like if you have a breakdown, if you have a flat tire, if you have a car with keys locked inside of it, they help with a lot of car related things. So towing, all of that. So literally you can just call them and they'll come out and they'll assist you with anything that you need, which they're really good about. And they're really timely about getting somebody out to help you, so you're not just out there for hours. So AAA technician was on the way. I sent a message, or I called, and basically they said that they were going to dispatch somebody within an hour. So it ended up being a little bit less than an hour. But anyway, she ended up calling. She said she was on the way. And then I got a call. She was like, hey, I'm 3 minutes away. Just make sure that you're near the car and that you have ID that you can show. So we're sitting, we're waiting. And then somebody pulls up in a truck. And my mom's like, well, maybe that's her. And then it's like, no, it's a neighbor coming to get mail. So we wait a little bit, and then she calls, and then she's like, I'm kind of lost. She's like, I have no idea where I am. So then I'm like, okay, great. Because this neighborhood is really big. It has several different little neighborhoods and several different little neighborhoods and several different subdivisions. So it's really easy to get lost in here. And then it was dark. So between being dark and between the neighborhood being so large, she just got kind of lost. And I'm like, well, fortunately, at the mailboxes, they do have an address, and I knew the road. So I was able to give her the actual address so she could put that in. And a few minutes later, she pulls up, and then she unlocks the car. And I screamed. Well, I didn't actually scream. I didn't physically scream. Inside, I screamed. Because at that point, I was like so excited, and I was so, y'all don't understand. Like, I was so excited to finally have the whole ordeal over and done. So, show my ID, get in the car, crank it up. Bloop, bloop, bloop. Low tire. So I'm like, well, that's not bad. You know, it could be a lot worse, but I mean, obviously it makes sense. It was out there in the cold for, honestly, it was only out in the cold for maybe, at that point, maybe 2.5, maybe 3 or so hours. 2.5, 3 hours, somewhere in that range. It was out in the cold. And so now I'm getting low tire pressure because it's cold outside. There's a story about that too. So anyway, after that, we went back home, and that whole ordeal was over. That happened last night. So today I was like, okay, well, I've got low tire pressure, and then my mom was going to take me to get something to eat. So I would have something to eat for tonight, and then I have something to eat for tomorrow. And honestly, like, I typed up a whole list because she said she's going to order from, I think she said she's going to order from Walmart. And I guess they have where they pick up your groceries or put your groceries together, and then you can just drive in and you can pick it up, drive through and pick up, whatever. So that's what she was planning on doing. And so I made a whole list of stuff for basically the next 14 days. But she was like, well, you don't have to do a full 14 days. You can just do a couple of days based on advisements. So since we don't expect that I was actually exposed to COVID, so just gonna do a couple of days. And basically she was like, that list is insane. But anyway, back to the story. So we are going to get, well, she was like, well, do you want to go to Panera first, or do you want to go and get air first? Fortunately, I said air, and you all will understand why. So I was like, well, let's go and get air first. So we go ahead, we're out here. We went to the first gas station. The very first gas station that we went to was actually one of the newer ones in the area. So we went to the newer gas station where their air pump actually accepts cards. They accept cards and they accept coins. When we got there, it was just somebody parked in front of it, but we didn't know what was going on. We thought maybe they were trying to get air, but it was literally just a kid and I guess his dad. And the dad had the driver's door open and his kid was just there playing around the car. So we're like, okay, well that's, you know, they're parked right there at the air pump. So we're like, okay, well, let's go someplace else, because obviously they're not trying to get air, they're just parked there and we don't really understand why, and neither one had a mask on. So that's the first place we went. The second place that we went was like one of those older gas stations. And so we pulled up and it had like this side air, this side vac. So we got there, my mom just started putting the coins in. So she put one in. She put one in under the vac. And I'm like, well, that ain't gonna work. I'm like, that's for the vacuum. I'm like, this side's for the air. So as she goes to try to put in the coins for the air, and somebody done stuck a nickel in it. So apparently it's out of order, but there's no sign there to say that it is. I just had a feeling because I saw this Captain D's trash bag there and it just looked run down. So I was just like, I just don't see us getting air from here. So anyway, we lost a quarter there. The third place, I filled up the tire that I got the low tire alert for. But I'm like, well, since it's cold, chances are probably just go ahead and try to fill up all of the tires. So I fill up the tire that I got the alert for. No problems. So now I'm going to the other side of the car to fill that tire up because I'm about to do all of them. So I go to the other side to try to fill that tire up. As I am putting the nozzle on to fill the tire up with air, it's like this big whoosh. It's like, okay. So the tire is letting out air and the air pump is also like it's not even pumping air into the tire. So I'm like, I don't, and even looking at the cord for the actual air, it looked like it was it looked like it was on its last leg. So I feel like maybe somewhere it was probably seeping. So between the tire seeping air and between the air pump seeping air, I'm like, I can't tell what's happening. So I'm putting the nozzle on the tire to actually fill it up. I just did this same exact thing on the other side and it filled that tire up no problem. So I'm like, well, maybe I just don't have it tight enough on there. So I'm pushing it and it sounds like at some point it sounds like the air kind of stopped. So then I'm lifting up the nozzle on the air pump and I'm like, I don't even hear the air. Like I hear the machine running, but I don't even hear air coming out of it. So I'm like, I don't understand what's going on. I'm like, we filled the first tire with no problem. What's going on with the second one? Like I've filled tires before. This isn't my first time doing it. So, and I've done it recently. So it's just like, I don't understand what's going on. So at this point it's saying like 0, 32, 0, 32, it's flashing. And I'm like, okay. And I know there was like, the last time that we filled tires, we filled my mom's and we actually accidentally overfilled it, but it's like the machine wasn't telling us what the tire pressure was. So when I took the pump off the tire and she screwed the little cap back on and then she cranked the car up, it said it was like 40 for the tire pressure. So we ended up letting some of the air out of that tire. But anyway, so I'm just like, I don't understand. I was like, well, maybe when I take this pump off, the tire pressure is higher than 32. Don't really know. But anyway, at this point, the pump is gone off and I'm like, okay, so basically we don't have a choice. And then she used our coins. So we're riding down the road and it just sound like you can hear the sound of the tire. It was so embarrassing. So basically we drove down a long strip of road and we stopped at another gas station. It was on the right hand side, a convenience store in the center. This gas station did not have an air pump at all, so we ended up riding around that. So we're like, okay, well, where's the next gas station? And then she's like, well, your car dealership's over there. She's like, we could go and ask them if they could fill the tire up for us, but we don't want them to come back and be like, oh, it's something wrong with your car, you got a flat tire, something, something, something. and then you end up having to pay for a tire or paying for a whole new set of tires. So I'm like, okay, well that's out, so let's just keep riding. We ride down to that end of the road, and I'm like, okay, well there's a gas station that is up the street from here. This one's like mad old, very, very old gas station, and so it has like that ancient pump that does not have a thing for cards at all. So we pull up to that, and I look at it and I'm like, well, it's got the air, it's got the vac, but neither light is green. So to me, I'm like, if neither light is green, it probably don't work. So I'm like, well, let's try someplace else. And at this point, my mom had already used her coins, so all she had was her card. So it's like, we can't use a card here, so we're gonna have to go back to a newer gas station. So we do all of this. We basically just drove around in some odd rhombus type shape, and so we end up back at the very first gas station, the one that they built last year, I believe. So this one, you can't use your cards and you can use quarters. So anyway, at this point, the man and his son are gone, so there's literally nobody over there. My mom's like, well, even if they have 50 people in line at this air pump, we're gonna have to wait for those 50 people. Like, at this point, she's like done with the situation. This point, I'm done with the situation too. She's going on at me. She's like, well, you shouldn't try to fix, basically like, you shouldn't try to fix things if it's not broke. So if it gives you an alert about this one tire, you feel that tire. Don't bother with the rest of them. But that's typically how it works. Typically how it works is I end up filling up one tire, and then a couple of days or the next day, I get an alert about a different one. So I'm just like, I just want to fill them all up. That's why I wanted to do it. But anyway, so we get to the very first gas station that we started at. And so she scans her card and we fill the tire up, no problems. At this point, it's like, well, do we go to Panera Bread at all? We ended up going to Panera because that was a part of the initial trip. And I'm like, well, it's a good thing that we didn't go there first, because by the time we did all that riding around, the food would have been cold. So anyway, that was our evening today. And so there's a lot going on with that car. But for right now, everything seems to be pretty good. Only thing that I'm working on, I got the battery now. I just purchased it for the fob. So I will be getting that resolved as well. And then hopefully everything will be in the clear. And then I've got a new battery for my Mac. So hopefully within the next couple of weeks, the next couple of days, matter of fact, the next week, hopefully like everything is like resolved and everything is like settled. But I'm like literally like that. I felt like if anybody, I'm sure some of you all have, if you have watched Hey Arnold, you know that character Eugene? I feel like him right about now. And then I was supposed to take my medication today, which basically is like daily medication that I take basically for my acne. It's medication I take every day for my acne. And I take that out of the pack, and I'm getting ready to drink some water to swallow it. It falls out of my mouth into the sink, and it doesn't just fall into the sink, it falls into the drain. So I'm done. I am done. Done with this week. I am done with this week. So anyway, it's crazy. So a lot has happened, a lot has been going on, and I wanted to share this. Just remember that there are people out there who have it worse than you do. And even in my situation, there are people that have it much worse than I do. Like, you know, some people might not have access to AAA. Some people might not have a card to ride in, honestly. So, you know, it's just, I was very, very fortunate and very blessed with the way that things turned out, because honestly, I'm like, if I don't get I mean, she offered the ride. My neighbor offered that ride to me, and I'm like, if she hadn't offered that ride, I could have been out there in the cold, and like my ears were already starting to go numb and stuff like that. It was freezing outside, no jacket on, short sleeves. But anyway, just remember that there are people out there that have it worse than you. Remember that you are blessed to be in the position and or positions that you are, because at the end of the day, we're all still living, we're all still breathing, and that's the important thing. So thank you all again for watching. I hope you all found some entertainment in my story. Maybe got a couple of laughs somewhere in there. But yeah, so that's all that happened. It wasn't much that really went on, but you know, I just thought that I would share it because it's crazy. It's like, yeah. Anyway, that is it. Thank you all again for watching, and I will see you all in the next video. Later.